Instead of the planned script, Zola spoke the truth. I see the danger not in the land, but in the heart. A spirit of avarice has woven itself into your circle, Matola. It seeks to bind your son not for love, but for the riches it envies. Leona shrieked, jumping up. She lies. She is a fraud. Look at her. She's possessed by the poverty she came from. Kofi stepped forward, placing a hand on Zola's shoulder. I already know. He had become suspicious of Leona's constant presence and insistence on guiding the divine counsel. He had investigated Leona, discovering her overwhelming debt and her history of pursuing wealthy, vulnerable men. He knew Leona had planted Zola. What he didn't know was the depth of Zola's deception, only that she was a victim. Seeing her plan crumble, Leona, wild-eyed, rushed forward. She pulled out the ragged clothes, Zola's old dress, stained with earth and sweat, and hurled them at Mrs. Matola. She's not Nandi. She's Zola. She sold water. She's a street urchin. Mr. Matola stood paralyzed, but Kofi defended Zola instantly. She is real, he said, pulling Zola closer. The lie was the Nandi persona. The truth is the woman who looks at this life and judges it fairly. The lie was created by her. Kofi pointed accusingly at Leona. In a fit of terrifying, blinding rage, Leona grabbed the heavy, antique ceremonial water jar that had been placed near the shrine, a gift from Mrs. Matola's spiritual advisor, filled with sacred, untreated river water, and swung it at Kofi. Mr. Matola lunged to protect his son, but in the chaotic motion, Leona lost her footing on the polished marble floor. She tripped, stumbled backward, and pitched straight through a large, ground-level glass window that overlooked a sharp, decorative stone fountain. The crash was sickening, an explosion of glass and a thud. Leona landed, impaled on the jagged edges of the ornamental fountain, the murky sacred water from the jar she had carried now mixing darkly with her own blood. It was a horrific, immediate end, the cruel irony of the sacred object becoming the instrument of a violent downfall. Dawn in the village. The scandal rocked the city, but the Matola family maintained a deliberate, shocked silence. Mr. and Mrs. Matola, though initially horrified by the deception, could not deny two things: Zola's final, honest prophecy had saved them from Leona, and the genuine, protective love Kofi held for the young woman. Kofi did not let Zola return to the village immediately. He saw her fragility and the lingering trauma of the fraud and Leona's tragic end. He didn't see a prophetess or a pauper, but a soul who had fought for survival and, in the end, for truth. The Matolas, humbled by the shocking violence and exposed vulnerability, learned to appreciate Zola's simple wisdom, the kind that came from the cold reality of life. Kofi resigned from his family's company, determined to pursue his own path in architecture, and Zola stood by his side. A year later, on a crisp morning, Zola and Kofi stood not in the Matola mansion, but near the remodeled grass-thatched house. Kofi had convinced the villagers to teach him traditional building techniques, blending modern efficiency with native materials. They had built a new, stronger home for Zola, and for them, in the heart of the village. As Zola leaned against Kofi, watching the sun rise, the scent of fresh thatch and newly turned earth filled the air. She wore a simple cotton dress, her eyes clear and unlined by coal. She was no longer Nandi, the prophetess, but Zola, the young woman who had found love in the ruin of a great lie. The scars of her deception were subtle, but the bond forged in that crucible of ambition and tragedy was iron-strong. They were together, bound by a history that began with a fraudulent prophecy, but ended with a very real, very quiet peace.